morning, Sandie. Welcome to Disabled and Proud. How are you today?
Morning. I'm not too bad, thank you. It's the best I've felt. So I had COVID about a month ago, and although I still am feeling it, this is definitely the best day since I got it. So it's been lingering for a long time, which is blooming awful. But yeah, I'm not feeling too bad today, thank you.
Oh, that's good. COVID is a nasty beast. I had it in, I think, end of May, beginning of June. And I was really COVID confident because I hadn't had it throughout the past like 2 and a bit years. And because I worked in healthcare, I was like, I'm immune. I was like, I'm the savior. Like I'm gonna be the one that never gets it. And then it floored me. And it took
Yeah,
me
it
about
does.
3-4 weeks to like actually get back to working capacity.
Yeah,
It was weird. Like it affects everybody so
horrible.
differently, doesn't it?
Mm,
But I'm
mm.
really glad that you're here today, and I'm really looking forward to this chat. And I think it'll be a really wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me. I love to be here. Thank you.
So the first question I ask absolutely every single guest is, how do you refer to your disability? And the reason that I ask this is because I believe, and I know that everybody else believes, but it's a real core belief of mine, is that every single disability is completely individual to the individual person. And like you could have the same diagnosis as such on paper, but how you refer to your disability will be completely individual. So how do you refer to yours?
I do actually, because I say I have a neurological condition,
Mhm.
but I have complications with my spine and my joints. Um, and that tends to stop people. I'd say that because people are really nosy, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they always go, "Oh, so why are you in a wheelchair?" And I know that they think that that's okay to ask, and we know that it's not okay to ask,
Yeah.
don't we, in the community? But people don't know that, and I try to be gentle with my education around why that's not okay,
Yeah.
um, and explain to them that some people might have had a really traumatic accident, and that question is very triggering for them. And
Yeah.
I say, it's not for me personally, however for other people, and you don't know that. So I try to educate gently if the
Yeah.
situation arises. And I know some people don't, and it does depend on our moods, doesn't it? We have
Yeah,
short tempers
massively.
sometimes, and if 10 people have asked that question, then I may answer differently that day. But so I tend to say I have a neurological condition, and then if they probe, I have to kind of assess how interested are you genuinely, and is this
Yes.
that you're just wanting to be, you're just interested in car crash information, as in I say that with inverted commas. You know what I mean? They just want to
Yeah.
be, they want the gory details because they
It's the
just,
entertainment value, isn't it?
that's it, that's it. Or do you want to be educated? And
Yeah.
I'll kind of like use a phased answering system. I'll drip feed a little bit. And I think if you're still interested and you're asking the right prompt questions, I'll give
Yeah.
you real proper information, but I'll kind of like tease information into there. So if they say, "Oh, really? Okay, and what kind of, and where's that come from?" And if I ask intellectual questions
Yeah.
about my neurological condition, how does that affect you? That must be challenging living in this world. What would you like to see different? Then, yes, I'll give information. If they go, "Oh, right, ooh, okay, that's weird, and what does that, can you have sex then?" And then I just shut that
Everyone
conversation
is
down.
obsessed with that question. Like everyone.
Sometimes it does make me want to, and I have been known to give incorrect answers for shock value and just to shut people up.
Oh, so have I. So have I. And on so many occasions, especially when I was younger, because obviously, like when you're younger, you're not that clever. You could be the brightest person in the world at the age of 14, but you're still not as clever as you're going to be at like 24. Like that's a fact.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
remember some answers that I came out with when I was younger, because obviously I wasn't necessarily as educated in disability as I am now. And I look back and I'm like, that was savage. How could I have said that to someone? But you're so
But
right, you do. You
yeah.
do. And it's and what you say about drip feeding the information I love, because you kind of have to assess the situation and whether or not the
Mhm.
person is actually taking like a valid interest in you as a person, or like I
Mhm.
said, is it that entertainment value? Do they want that gory, shocking story? Do they want to hear that you had some kind of traumatic event, which, you know, some people do have very traumatic events, and that's how they end up being disabled or acquiring their disability. But other people are just born with it, and there is no story behind the reason you are the way you are.
Yeah. And I think with my condition, so I have FND, functional neurological condition, but I also have structural organic problems wrong with my spine and my pelvis and my joints, arthritis and joint problems from a fall that stemmed from when I was 15, that have caused mechanical problems through my spine as I've aged. But there's a lot of stigma around FND. Which there shouldn't be, but there is. So I will box clever with that. And I've done a lot of research around FND. So I would say it's a neurological condition, starting off. And then I will talk about brain damage, because our brains, when you have FND, there is brain damage. Although you can't see it on certain scans, you can see it on other scans, but you can't see it on a standard MRI. You can see it on a functional MRI. The way that the signals are routed in our brains is different. It's wrong. It's incorrect. So there is brain damage, the way that our signals work. And that's created throughout our lives and triggered at a certain time in our lives. So the damage is created throughout the periods of time. And then the trigger happens at a specific time in your life. So I will talk about neurological condition. I will then talk about brain damage. And it's really, really interesting, because if I then start talking about, and people will be very interested in, if I then start talking about the causes, my own causes, for example, I'm very, very observant of how, if any, there is any shift when they start to say they don't believe you as much as they did before, and they're not as receptive to it as they were before. So if you're talking about brain damage and you would say, oh, this is from a car accident, people would tend to be very, very sympathetic and understanding, and that must be very difficult. But if you're talking about brain damage that's been sustained over a period of time from, I don't know, abuse or maladaptive coping tendencies, or overstretching yourself, people who train for the Olympics, for example, can be very susceptible to functional neurological disorder, because they do not listen to their bodies. They push and push and push, and if you don't have that connection to listening to the signals that your brain gives you to say that is not a good thing to carry on doing, and you continue to ignore the signals from your body, your brain will learn incorrect pathways. That's the brain damage I'm talking about. So it's not always, people think of brain trauma always with something horrendous in your life, but it doesn't always have to be. Brain trauma can come from what we can perceive as good things. People who are very, very work orientated, that have huge high-powered careers, can come from that. And I know from me, I was very, very career orientated. I worked so hard. I loved my career. So it doesn't always come from something that we perceive to be bad. And I will watch people's perceptions as I start to talk about that. And again, if they start to negatively shift the way they receive that information, I will shut that down. So I think you are not going to hear what I have to say.
And
but if they don't,
you're not the right audience for it.
And it's a shame, because I want people to listen and I want them to be educated. Most of the time that doesn't happen. Most of the time they will be really, and I do it that way. I want people to go, I had never thought of a brain injury to come from overworking, or to come from overtraining, or to come from just not listening to my body. But it's so true when you put it like that. That is something we all need to be really aware of. We need to listen to that mind-body connection, because it's dangerous if we don't. And oh my goodness, is it dangerous if we don't. So I try to educate gently.
And it's interesting that you brought up your career, because that's what I wanted to next come on to is, so obviously having is it NFD? No, FND.
FND,
I
functional
was so
neurological.
close. I was so close. Having that, how has that impacted your career and the career choices that you were like taken?
Well, I lost my job because of it. So
Uh-huh.
my passion is in creative careers. I have a degree in illustration, in art, but I was kind of like fine art illustration and sort of conceptual illustration.
Yeah.
Think of Damien Hirst. He tells a story through his installations. A lot of my work would be storytelling through conceptual work. And then I took that into marketing and branding. And I absolutely loved anything to do with that kind of world. It
Yeah.
had my heart and soul. I really, really loved it. And photography as well. I've worked as a photographer professionally as well. But then my life changed. I got sick the first time, and I stopped working. And then through having to work, I ended up just going into office work.
Yeah.
And I was working in an office when I collapsed with the stroke, what they assumed was a stroke, and it was actually a functional stroke. So it looks like a stroke, all the symptoms are the same, but the cause is slightly different. In the recovery from that, that's when they said that they couldn't accommodate my new normal. And I lost my job very, very abruptly.
Yeah.
It was very hard to hear, actually, because they did have one interview with me, and then I just received a letter saying we can't accommodate you. There was no discussion about what my needs might be. It was just we can't accommodate. And that was really hard to hear because I was very sick at the time.
Yeah.
But I wasn't given any opportunity to say, well, what might you need? I was thinking about access to work, and there was things that could be done. I like to think that there was a possibility, and that shook my world really, because as I said, at the time I'd always worked really hard. I had my first job at the age of 12. I lied to get my first job, so I've worked really hard my whole life.
Yeah.
So it was really difficult, and I think it does hit you hard when you framed your identity around work, and that's taken away from you. There's this gap, isn't there? There's this vacuum of like, well, who am I now then? And that's not necessarily a bad thing for me, because it gave me an opportunity to think, well, should I fill that vacuum with work again, or should I actually take this opportunity to look at who I am in the absence of work, and really start to build myself as a human being, and then reflect who I am out onto the world. And that's what I chose to do, and then the work then came to me, and I think that's a much healthier way of doing it.
Yeah, and you're forging yourself in the flames, really, aren't you? Because
absolutely,
you've had that moment where and employers can be very ableist when you're not even able to discuss what needs you might have or what could be done to help you, and it's just shut down straight away. But then like as you said, you're taking that perspective of who are you outside of work, but actually it's the perfect time to, like, I don't want to say reinvent yourself, because I feel like that's very like far-fetched, but you are giving yourself that time to think about who are you outside of work, and like what do you offer the world. And like as you said, the work then came to you, which I think is a really beautiful way of looking at it, because you haven't gone out there and chased it, it's almost chased you. And I think that's like a lovely moment of like, it's a cycle really, you've kind of had that moment that wasn't so great, but actually the flip side of it is that everything then started to come to you after, I'm sure, a lot of hard work.
And do you know what, I think facing the reality that when the work option was taken away from me, I really did think that there was nothing to me. There wasn't any substance to me in lots of ways. I mean, there was more to it than that, but for the purpose of this conversation, it really took took that looking in the mirror and thinking, do you really think that all of your worth comes from doing the work? So therefore, isn't it about time you took this opportunity to dig deeper than this shallow level that you've only been existing on, and pull out these elements of yourself that actually really are who you are, examine them and say, is this who I am? Is this who I want to be? And sift through and think, actually, I don't like that part of myself. I'd like to, deal with that and get rid of it. And this part I do like, and I'd like to hone that skill more and embrace it and grow that area of myself and become a better version of myself through this exploration.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like I'm seeing a mental image of a cave which used to be filled with water, and the water was work, and that water is empty. And now I've got this chance to dig into the walls of the cave and unearth these gemstones.
Yeah.
And actually the walls are filled with all these incredible gemstones that I didn't even see because it was filled with water.
Yeah.
And instead of this just water that was just flat water, I've filled this huge, wonderful cavern with all these incredible gemstones, which mean so much more and are so much more precious than it was before. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was a really great opportunity that I would never have been able to do before. And I am thankful for that opportunity, actually.
Yeah. And I think that's such a beautiful way to describe it. And like, definitely going to take that away with me for sure.
Yeah.
So interestingly, how did you get into social media and disability modeling? Because I love that. I love that we now have models who represent the larger parts of our community, because when I was growing up, that was not there. Like these talent agencies, these modeling agencies, they did not exist. But how did you get involved in that?
Oh, it's a strange, it's all to do with this finding myself thing, really. When I decided that I did matter and I was going to start living again, I kind of crawled back up off the floor, as it were, and thought, right, okay, as we do, we look outside of ourselves for inspiration. We want to find people like us. And I tried to reach out on social media to find other people. I did find the chronic illness community and grasped hold of that, and I started to, and I thought, okay, I felt very, very alone when I got sick, and I didn't want anyone else to feel like that, but I also wanted to journal how I was feeling. So that's how I started my account, for those two reasons, to kind of journal what I was going through, and also so that someone else who might search could find another person and not feel alone. And then as I started to regain my confidence, I wanted to write this piece about the journey, which we use that word a lot, but I can't find another one that's better. the transition from this emptiness to rising to what I felt like somebody who could, I called it the goddess, from the goddess in the shell, this empty shell, this goddess that could fly through the sky with flames at her heels, this thing that happened to me, this transition. And I started documenting it, and I took some photographs of myself that at the time, it's quite funny, if you look at my social media now, you'll think, well, that's quite funny, because I took photos in black and white of myself that were of the bits of me that I didn't like at the time. So the texture on my skin, the rolls at my tummy, and my face that was unfiltered, and they were just black and white photographs. And I felt I was so brave to do that. And this is me. I love myself. I didn't love myself. I just made a decision to love myself. It was just the moment I chose to face the pathway of going to love myself. And I documented it with this piece of writing, and I posted it, and I was absolutely terrified. I felt physically sick when I made that first post, and I actually messaged my friend and I said, I I'm so scared. I don't know if I can do it. And she said, you can do it. You can do that. Think of everything you've said to me. And I saw a hip post and I said, I've done it. I've done it. I've hip post. Oh no, what have I done? But the response was so incredible that it fired me up, that people responded, that it resonated with them.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I didn't just hear, oh, you look amazing, because it wasn't that. It was like, I see myself in this. I needed to hear this. This has helped me. And
Yeah.
it for me, it set me on the path. And from there, then I saw the casting call for a brand I work with a lot and have become like my work family. I kind of put myself forward to become one of their brand ambassadors, working with them doing lingerie.
Yeah.
Modeling. And I thought, oh, I'll never hear, because thousands of people apply, you know, I'll never hear anything. And then I got the yes, we'd love to have you. And I could not believe it, believe it. And that was the start of it, really. And then I thought, okay, now I'm actually going to have to post pictures of myself in underwear. I said to tell my husband, are you okay with this? Because this is going to happen. Just want you to know that, you know, maybe
Just
we
a
should
heads up.
not tell your mum. Yeah.
Oh, I
So
love
that's
that.
what started it. Yeah.
I love that so much, because it's almost like, and a lot of people that I've spoken to also kind of say something pretty similar, and it's almost like you kind of like fall into this line of work when it comes to like disability activism type
Yeah.
work. You never really set out to be that person,
No.
but you're
No.
kind of just speaking like your day-to-day truth, and then people
Yeah.
are receptive to what you have to say, and that's how it kind of happens. And I always think that
Yeah.
that's the best way for things to happen, is that you accidentally fall into it, and it's like, oh, like I was just chatting about my day, and now all of these wonderful things have come out of it, and that's the best way forward.
Yeah. And I did a tiny bit of modeling when I was younger. I think the first stuff I did was when I was about 17, 18. And then I didn't do anything again until I was in my 30s, and I worked with some charities then. But I think what I love about doing it now is that there's this intersection, and I do recognize that I am in a very privileged position. Although I'm in a wheelchair, my disability is visible. I'm a white, middle class kind of woman, I guess. I'm perceived as that anyway. So I do recognize I'm very palatable as a disabled person, and I recognize that privilege. However, from my perception, it's I don't see many midlife disabled women portrayed in the media, and it's very hard to get to my age. Take away disability, my age is a really hard age to reach. I'm 51, and it's a hard age for any woman. You know, things change in your body. We have menopause, we have the way our bodies look that changes. Our children are leaving home. There's a lot that changes in our lives that is very hard for us to deal with. And around careers as well, you know, people feel like we can't offer the same in our jobs, and a lot of that is to do with careers, because our brains don't. I mean, I have FND as well, so my neurological capability is really impacted by my condition, but also menopause has a lot to do with that. So it does impact on how well or how we can work. We have to work differently strategically. So there's a lot happening. So I would be struggling anyway with my identity in the way that I want to be perceived as a I'm going to just say it, as a sexual being, you know.
Yeah.
I want to say woman, but sometimes, I mean, I identify as queer, so sometimes it's not just as a woman. So I do, you know, there is a fluidity around my identity. So sometimes I'm hugely feminine, and sometimes I'm more masculine. So there is a fluidity around that. But, you know, as a sexual being, it's a really important part of me to be able to express myself strongly.
Yes.
And as a stylish person, fashion is hugely important to me and has always been. And when you combine that with the intersection of disability, there is not much representation. If you look online, there will be quite a lot of disability representation, visible, non-visible. A lot of that will be young. If you look for midlife, there's a lot of midlife women. If you look at mid-size, because I'm 12 to 14, there's a lot of mid-size. There is not a lot of all of those things coming together.
Yeah.
And I struggle because I'll see somebody who's mid-size showing me some beautiful outfits, and I'm like, that doesn't look the same when I'm sat down.
Yeah.
And I'll look at some outfits that are on beautiful people that are in wheelchairs, and they'll all be really young, and I'll be like, that's great, but it doesn't look so good on me. Or
Yeah.
and I struggle with that, and I can't be the only one. I can't be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, completely.
So I'm going back to the fact that I do recognize that I am in a privileged position, but I still feel underrepresented. I still feel it.
Yeah, and I think that is key, is that, you know, it's always about recognizing your privilege, isn't it? Like, I'm very aware that I am a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, size 6 woman. I'm incredibly palatable as a disabled woman. Like, I'm almost not quite, but I'm almost acceptable. Like, so I completely understand that. And it's interesting because I was talking to Victoria Jenkins, who I know that you know. And it was all about how she wanted to create fashion for bodies that do sit in chairs, because the pants that they're cut differently, and it's things that we don't necessarily always think about. It's not like the immediate first thought. And I think it's so wonderful that you are that person. You're showing that, and you're turning up, and you're representing for those people, because you're right, like, there isn't much representation for all of, like, everything that crosses for you. Whereas for me, like, there's a bit that I can see myself every now and then, not as much as I'd like to, but like, I can find it and I can see it if I want to. But for you, it's very different in that.
Yeah, I have to pick bits out, and then I might pick something from wheelchair fashion, and I might pick something from midlife, and I'm constantly having to adapt it. And there's not very much exact in my niche, and I recognize it is niche. There's not much, and there needs to be more, because there are an awful lot of midlife disabled women. There's loads of us, and we just we're struggling, and but I'm telling you, you know, we want to be stylish, we want to feel sexy, we want to feel relevant. We're still here, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, and we want to go out to events when we've got the freaking energy, you know. We want to go to out for dinner dates. We want to look, even if we're slumming about in the house, we want to still look a bit nice. We don't want to have to just wear what we have to wear. And I'm trying, but it is a weird thing, because there's that imposter syndrome constantly going on in my head. I'm constantly doubting myself. Who am I to say that? What authority do I have to say that? Who wants to listen to me anyway, Sandie? You know, what do you think you're doing? And it's really hard. Sometimes it does, you know, you'll catch yourself you're in front of your ring light, posing away, and then this little voice will go on your shoulder going, who do you even think you are, madam, smiling at the camera like that? And it puts you right off your stride. Other times you're thinking, yes, girl, you've got it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's such a key thing, is that when that, like, voice of imposter syndrome comes about, you've almost just got to be like, I'm the best person for this. If not me, who? That's what I always think. And that's like the exact same for me when I was starting this podcast. I had a whole moment where I was like, am I qualified enough to be talking about these topics? And then I was like, Brooke, disability has been your entire life. Like, who else is more qualified? Like, surely other disabled people are, but this is my idea, so I'm like the most qualified to create it and spawn it and whatever. And that's the thing we've always got to remember. Like, you're always the best person for your own ideas, and like, you're always the best person to carry out the things that you want to do, because you wouldn't have had that thought, idea, dream, plan, whatever, if you weren't able to put it into action.
And there is space, isn't there, for more than one? This is what I keep telling myself. We are the only people who have lived our experience.
Yeah.
And we have a unique perspective on our version of the world, or our view of the world, that we can offer and that somebody else might not, So we have something to offer the world. We have our own perspective to offer the world that somebody else might get something from. Because I'm all about everything I do is with the purpose of it might help somebody. It has to be with, how can this help someone? How can this raise someone's energy that day? How can it enrich someone's life? How is this helping? If I'm just doing something because it's about making me feel better, then it doesn't feel authentic. And I might film it, or I might record it, or I might shoot it, and I won't post it because it just feels like it's indulgent to me.
It's almost like the energy is off, right?
Just feels icky. And I know that some people do that, and that's fine. That's fine for them. But for me, if it doesn't somehow work to help somebody else in some way, or I don't believe it to be, it just doesn't feel right. And there's probably stuff that I have done that I don't like, and that will be the reason why. But it tends to be now I've got stuff in my drafts, sitting to wait to post, and I've gone to and I've got no, and that's probably the reason why I haven't done it, because it just doesn't feel quite, it feels too self-indulgent, and it's probably just focusing on me and not going to be about anyone else, and that's why I haven't posted it yet, and it probably won't ever get posted.
But I like that we're having this conversation, because I always think through hard times, people find, like, kind of once you've come out of like hard times or difficult times, you tend to find that there's a positive attribute about yourself that you didn't necessarily know you had. I always say that my disability, well, I don't know if my disability has made me tenacious or I'm naturally a very tenacious person, but the two kind of go hand in hand for me. And I was wondering, upon reflection, have you found a positive attribute about yourself that has come through hard times?
100%. I would go so far as to say I'm grateful for my disability.
Yeah.
I think it has made me a better person. It has made me more empathetic, kinder. It has forced me to grow and reflect on those areas of myself that I didn't like as much. I think that it has definitely made me stronger. Yeah. But I think the best thing about my disability is it has forced me to look at who I am.
Yeah.
And there's things I've said, things I've done in my past that I really wish I hadn't, to be honest. And that if we can't, this is one of the hardest things I've learned. We cannot go back and change it. We can only start from here. And I'm grateful for my disability for forcing me to look at myself. That vacuum, that empty cave moment was an opportunity for me to say, actually, now that with this perspective, with these glasses on that I'm looking at through my own experience, looking back over my life, the things I've said there, I wouldn't do now, and I will not do again in the future. And had I not had these glasses on, this vision of disability, I may have done that again through ignorance. I'm not saying, I didn't know I was doing those things badly, but through ignorance. And now I've had my eyes opened and I'm more aware. I'm glad that I can do that. And I much prefer the person I am now. And it's made me hungry for more growth and more self-exploration. It's no secret I've been in taking regular therapy for 2.5 years. It's not because I consider myself broken and I'm desperately needing therapy. There's plenty of times where I go in and I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I feel like we have this saying, myself and my therapist, that I'm like an onion and we just peel off layers, and then we'll cruise for a few weeks, and then she'll just pull a thread, and then we go, woof, okay, we're going to go deeper here. And I love that. To me, it's like a workout for my emotional self. I'm just getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So I wouldn't have had that if I didn't have my disability.
I personally think therapy is the best thing since sliced bread. Like,
Yeah.
if I had all the money in the world, I'd make sure that all my friends and family got therapy, because I'm pretty sure everyone benefits from it. Like, you
Yeah.
need therapy, you can get therapy for free for you. Like, I would genuinely do it for everyone.
Yeah.
Because I think you are, like, you're right. You like, you shed layers of yourself that you didn't even know was there, and you
Yeah.
confront beliefs that
Yeah.
sometimes aren't even necessarily yours. There's something that you've picked up along the way, and actually upon reflection, it actually has absolutely sweet FA to do with you. And like, I
Yeah.
think, like I said, I love therapy. I'm all for therapy. I think everybody should have it. Like, I think it should be prescribed for everyone.
I think you should have it from school. Yeah, go to school, start your weekly therapy.
But honestly, I do. I'm
Yeah.
I'm so on that train. I'm like, yes, everybody needs to get therapy. Like, make therapy cool. Therapy
Normalize talking about your beliefs and the way that you think and feel. Normalize talking about that on a regular basis. Normalize analyzing it. Normalize self-reflection. Normalize it from kindergarten up. Just normalize it, and then the world will be a much better place.
And also, it's quite nice to have someone who's completely like, they have absolutely no interest in what you're about to tell them. Obviously, they do have an interest, but it's like they're not vested in it. So like, if I said some of the things that I've said in therapy to like my mum, dad, friends, they'd be like, oh my goodness, like, why are you around? Like, you need help. And I'm like, yes, that's why I have therapy. But it's a safe space for everyone, and I'm so pro therapy. Like, make it cool. I think it's great. Like, I'm all for it. Interestingly, I always ask, do you have a piece of advice for either or, and most people tend to answer both, for a younger version of yourself, or alternatively, a younger person with the same disability as you?
So the younger version of myself is a big one, because my poor younger self, oh bless her heart, she needs to know that it's going to be okay, and she would need to know, don't stay. Don't stay, darling. You can leave and it will be okay. Be brave. That's what I would say to her. You don't have to. My younger self was very scared to leave situations and stayed in places where she should not have done. So I think if I would give my younger self advice, it would be, you'll be okay on your own.
Yeah.
Life will be okay if you leave that situation. So if I was to give advice to someone younger with my condition, that would be, well, actually anybody with my condition who's just got it. It doesn't even have to be younger. Believe yourself, especially with this condition. The biases around this condition is that it's not real, it's made up, and then that is, you take that on board into your own head, and you start to doubt everything, that you are creating a different version of reality that is completely not real in your own head, and it's so damaging. It just adds to the condition, actually. So to just believe the symptoms are real. It doesn't matter about the cause. It doesn't matter that the tests that they run don't show the cause for your symptoms, because they are the wrong tests. For example, epilepsy would have looked like a not real condition 150 years ago. Before they had x-rays, a broken bone would have looked like a not real condition. Before they had whatever tests, blood tests, these conditions would not have shown up, and they would have just said, oh no, that's fine. You don't have a break in your skin, therefore you are fine. You can't see it, therefore you're fine. So it's just that the tests that they're running aren't the right tests. Believe your body, believe the symptoms that you are feeling. If you feel them, they are real, and just hold on to that, because not everything that the doctors say, unfortunately, because they're not educated, are true. And even if they tell you that is not real, that symptom is not real, you don't have to believe them.
And I'm laughing a little bit there, because I actually said these exact words yesterday. is that quite often disabled people are the ones who are educating the doctors about their condition, and it's not the other way around, because you are giving them the information about your condition, your treatment, about how you're thinking, feeling, how it affects you, when, you know, doctors don't necessarily, and no shade to any doctor out there, but they don't always know what they're on about, quite frankly. And that's, I think that's a really important piece of advice. Actually, sometimes,
especially with the more rarer conditions,
for sure,
or unknown conditions, and it's so damaging. I had a doctor say to me that my seizures weren't real, so just stop having them. When he said about I asked him what I should do about my seizures. He said, well, we know they're not real. And I said, he said, so just stop having them. That's his exact words. Just a neurologist. So just stop having them. And I can remember just feeling like I'd been smacked in the face. And I think I cried for nearly 4 hours after he said that, because I just internalized that as failure on my part. You know, this is quite early on in my diagnosis. And now obviously I have a completely different perspective on that. I've had apologies from specialists in FND and told that he was wrong, that, you know, I've had all of that now, but the damage that caused me, psychological damage, emotional damage, and also physical harm because of the pain that caused me, the way that I then pushed my body. It was just horrendous. I don't even want to get into it. It was just horrendous. So this is a qualified medical professional who unfortunately had no training in my condition and said that awful thing. And this is the reality. People will say things, but it's really important that you believe yourself. You are the expert in your body. And that's a very easy thing to say. And it's not an easy thing to do. And that's why it's really important to reach out to people. Second part of advice to your question. Here we go. 2 bits. Reach out to people who also have the same condition as you. They will be able to help you and give you advice and support. Really important.
It's interesting because this transition is seamless, if I do say so myself. When I was younger, not so much now, every now and then, but when I was younger, a lot of people always used to ask me either what happened or did a shark bite your arm off? Now, I've come to realize that they're really A, annoying questions, and B, really intrusive questions, like we were talking about at the beginning. And I was wondering if you had a particular like question or set of questions that you just find far too much from other people.
Just generally the why are you in a wheelchair? And where that leads to. To be honest, I haven't been in a wheelchair permanently for that long, as in full time. I was in a wheelchair when I was 15 for about a year. That was my first experience. But my perception then was very different. I hated it. So I was full of ableism at that point. So I don't know if that's got something to do with it. My tolerance level has not maxed out yet. So I tend to try to be polite and understanding with why they're asking those questions. And I also wonder, you know, I can't honestly say I didn't ask those questions myself between the ages of 15 and 40, whatever I was when I got sick. I understand that people will ask questions. It does annoy me. If people ask me about sex, then I get really annoyed.
People are obsessed.
They are really obsessed, and it's so private. So private. And I cannot fathom why they think it is okay. The thing that really bugs me, and I don't have much tolerance for, is when people ask the person I'm with questions about me rather than me specifically, and that I get I will be very abrupt with. And that has happened to me, and I have no tolerance for it. I will butt straight in and say, excuse me, do you not think, and I will call them out. I will call out how rude that is, how inappropriate that is, and why they shouldn't be doing it. And I will completely pull them up on it, and I won't be polite about it, because I do think that's ignorance, but I don't think it's general kind of like polite ignorance. I think it's a real blanket, don't care about disabled people kind of.
Yeah.
I hate it.
There is a big difference between ignorance for the sake of genuinely not knowing and ignorance just for the sake of being lazy and not really caring. There is a big difference.
Yeah. I think what gets me the most about when people ask somebody a question about me that isn't me, there's a real underlying discrimination against disabled people when you choose to ignore that disabled person and speak to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really, really much bigger than someone just asking, oh, why are you in a wheelchair? I think that's just lack of education. I think it's a bigger sin, if you want to call it that. When someone does, I think that really shows that they don't think you are of equal standing as a human being than the person who stood right next to you.
Yeah.
Underneath it, that's the reason why they're not speaking to you.
It's an interesting one because you're not the first person to have said that. And it's interesting because I think people don't always understand that, like, physical disability, hidden, visible, whatever, intellectual disability, they're not all the same. Disability as a term is actually it's an umbrella term for a lot of different things. And a lot of people don't seem to understand that actually within that umbrella term there are so many subsections, there are so many different branches, that actually you can't just on the face of it think that because someone is in a wheelchair that means that they're not going to be able to like fend for themselves, talk about themselves, like have their own thoughts, feelings, opinions, because that sometimes is what it boils down to. And you know, it's like it's a barrier. Of course it's a barrier, but it's how you approach the barrier that makes a difference.
Yeah, it's about putting somebody else's considerations, emotions, needs above your own.
Yeah.
So if asking that person has additional needs is hard for you because you might have to speak differently or you might have to wait longer to have your answer, it's harder for you and you're uncomfortable with that, that's on you. And people choose to put themselves above the other person. That's what it boils down to. It makes people uncomfortable, and that to me is the reason we need more education and exposure in the media so that it's normal.
Yeah.
Normalize it so that it doesn't make people uncomfortable. Don't shove it away, don't hide it away, because the more we do that, the more uncomfortable people will be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, like, oh my god, transitions today are actually seamless. They're so good.
We worked this out in advance, didn't we? Really?
Honestly, like even if I'd been like, this is the lowdown, this is where we're going with this, like we would not have got it as good as this. My final question is, Sandie, can you say that you're disabled and proud?
Oh, 100%. Every day.
Yeah.
I'm so proud. I own that word. I believe that being disabled is something unique. We bring a spectrum of colour to this world.
Yeah. Disability
stops humanity from stagnating. I've spoken about this slightly before on another podcast. However, I want to say it because I don't think it's talked about enough. Adversity drives innovation.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have struggles, we don't have something to fight against, we don't have something to invent a new way round, look at ways of overcoming, look at ways of growing, like I said about my empty cavern, you know, ways of overcoming, growing as a human race. If we all just become bland beige humanity and genetically blend out any kind of difference in the race of humans, what is there to strive for? What would we do? How would we grow? I'm not talking about the race to the moon or the next star or the next galaxy. I'm talking about as human beings. What would there be to we would just become nothing. We would not do anything. How would we grow? What would we would just be this boring, bland nothing. And yet we as disabled humans bring challenges. We've just had an entire conversation about the richness of our lives. Bring two people in to a podcast who've never had challenges, who've never had adversity, who've never struggled with anything. What on earth are they going to talk about? What are they going to talk about? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They might have other struggles. They might have other adversities in other areas of their life. Yeah. However, if you bring out physical, mental, emotional challenges, that's an entire section of being human.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
It is.
It's like we are made up of physical, emotional, and mental part. That's part of being human. If you stop a range of diversity within that, it's just there's nothing there. It's an emptiness. Being disabled brings so much richness to our lived experience. When you start to talk about it, I'm interested in disabled people's lived experience. I find it fascinating. I want more of it. I want more of that in my life. I want more disabled friends. I want more in my life. And I'm so proud to be in this community. I am a proud disabled human being. Bring it on. Bring more of it to me.
Thank you so much for coming on today. I have really, really enjoyed this conversation, and it's been full of some absolute gems. Like, there are going to be things that I take away from this conversation that I'm going to carry with me for a really long time, I think, because it's just been genuinely wonderful, and I've really loved having you on. And thank you so much for giving up your time to come on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. I've had a ball. Actually, really had a great time talking about things that haven't had a chance to talk about. So I have really, really enjoyed myself. But thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much for being on, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.